self-leadership is the essence of character development. I think that's, if I had to say it in a sentence or two, I'd start there, that self-leadership is the core of character development. You can develop it in that way. And then second, you really can't lead others if you can't first lead yourself.
This is the L3 Leadership Podcast, episode number 257. What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the L3 Leadership Podcast, where we are obsessed with helping you grow to your maximum potential and to maximize the impact of your leadership. My name is Doug Smith, and I am your host, and in today's episode, you'll hear my interview with Dan Reiland. If you're unfamiliar with Dan, let me just tell you a little bit about him. Dan Reiland is the executive pastor at 12stone Church in Lawrenceville, Georgia. He previously partnered with John Maxwell for 20 years, first as an executive pastor at Skyline Wesleyan Church in San Diego, and then as vice president of leadership and church development at Enjoy. Dan is best known as a leader with a pastor's heart and a coach's instincts. He truly loves the local church and is described as one of the nation's most innovative church thinkers. His passion is developing and empowering leaders who want to grow, are willing to take risks, and enjoy the journey. And I've been wanting to interview Dan for a long time. I've been following his work since I was a teenager. I first learned about him through John Maxwell. As you all know, I'm a huge John fan, and it was an honor to be able to sit down and interview Dan. And in the interview, we talk about leading through crisis. We talk about his brand new book, The Confident Leader, which is absolutely excellent. And of course, we take him through the lightning round. This was such a fun interview. You're going to get so much out of this. But before we dive into the interview, just a few announcements. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Baritone Advisors. The financial advisors at Baritone Advisors help educate and empower clients to help make informed financial decisions. Find out how Baritone Advisors can help you develop a customized financial plan for your financial future. Please visit their website at Baritone Advisors, that's BERATUNG, advisors.com. Securities and investment products and services offered through Waddell & Reed, Inc., member FINRA and SIPC. Baritone Advisors, Waddell & Reed, and L3 Leadership are separate entities. Hey leader, we tell you all the time here at L3 Leadership that you should never do life alone, but in community. And that's why I want to challenge every single one of you to become a member of L3 Leadership. When you become a member of L3 Leadership, you'll have access to our community of leaders who are willing to encourage you, support you, and hold you accountable for going after your goals. You'll also have access to monthly live webinars that we do with nationally known leaders, monthly Q&A and hot seat hours for our members where you can troubleshoot the issues that you're having with your goal and get live real-time feedback on them to help you develop a plan to overcome those issues. You'll have access to every course that we ever create. You'll have access to every L3 one-day talk we've ever had, and so much more. And all of this is available for just $25 a month. In fact, we believe so much in the product that we are willing to give you your first month for just $1. That's right, if you sign up today at l3leadership.org, your first month of membership is just $1. Leader, don't grow another minute without having a community of leaders to which you can go to and grow with. Sign up today at l3leadership.org. And with all that being said, let's dive right into the interview. Here's my interview with Dan Reiland. Well, Dan, it's an honor to have you on the podcast. You've been on my bucket list to interview for many, many years, so it's an honor that this would actually happen. And thank you for giving us your time this morning. And why don't we just start off with you telling the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Oh my! Well, I think essentially just a dad and a husband, but for my career for the last 39 years, I've been a pastor, and I love it. Working first with John Maxwell, then it actually closely with Andy Stanley, but not as on staff, but actually as a board member there for a while, and now with Kevin Myers, 19 years here as executive pastor, which is what I've done for a long, long time. Actually moving a little bit more toward what they're calling chief of staff as we're raising up the next generation of younger guys, the younger, cooler versions of me, which is the right thing to do, and I'm having a blast doing it. So that's a quick snapshot. Oh, and I guess I should tell you, my wife and I now have our first grandchild, a little girl, and we are pumped. It's keeping us even younger than we already are.
Oh, that's awesome. Hey, while you just mentioned it, because this wasn't in my notes for the interview, but can you talk a little bit about that transition from executive pastor to chief of staff? What does that look like? Because there's probably organizations who are clearly thinking through succession right now. I'm just curious why the shift and what are you doing?
Well, the shift is a narrowing of if I had three. Obviously, everybody has 27 things that they do, right? But if you focus it down to the three big rocks, the three big buckets that I've done for many, many years, is one is obviously all things staff. And then second is ministry architecture, ministry design, what we do, what we don't do in ministry. Is it working? Is it not working? How do we make it better? That kind of a thing. And then church-wide leadership development, all that kind of thing. So we're raising up and have just named the young XP who's taking a great deal of that. And so I'm shifting now more to all things staff, which is allowing me to focus on going deeper and deeper layers of primarily, there's about 5 categories, but primarily in the areas of culture and development. And so that's the core of my great passion anyways, to get the culture right and develop the leaders. And so I get to focus there maybe more coach than tactical and strategic kind of a thing.
Okay, well, maybe I'll get to pick your brain on that a little bit later. I want to dive into just leading through crisis. And, right now we're in the middle of COVID-19 and there's so much going on, but this certainly isn't the first crisis you've ever led through. And leaders who are leading today, this won't be the last crisis we ever lead through. So I just want to talk about specifically leading through crisis and just big picture. What are you learning and seeing when it comes to leading through crisis for leaders?
Yeah, I love that question. It's so big. I think when I think about leading in crisis, it's like the difference between leading in wartime and leading in peacetime. It's that dramatic. And I think we have so little experience leading in wartime, we're maybe not so good at it. And one of the things that I'm watching myself and leaders around me and around the country, is it's really important to know if your tendency is to overplay it or underplay it, to overlead or underlead. And because we all have a wire, we all have a bent, we all go to that one side or another. I'm a classic underplay it. My wiring is, it's going to be okay, we're going to be fine, you're going to be, we're going to, and the overplay it's we're all going to die, kind of a thing. But it's important to know which one you are in crisis. I'll tell you a fun short story. I had taken my in-laws, my father-in-law is 85 years old. He loves baseball. I took him to a baseball game for his birthday. Took the whole family. And third inning, we're rained out. It is pouring rain. I mean, it's dark. It's black outside, the clouds. It's raining. And I didn't want the whole family to have to go, 200 yards or 100 yards away in the rain to the car. So you guys stay here. I'll go get the car. I'll pull it up. And you guys run. You guys jump in. And of course, I wasn't the only one who had that idea. There was a long line of cars lined up, and it was dark, it was raining, and so I pulled up, and my door opened, and this lady got in my car who I've never seen in my life before. She just got in my car and sat in the passenger seat, and she starts just like brushing the water and the rain, and she's like, oh my gosh, the rain. And this went on for like 3 or 4 or 5 seconds. That's a long time with a strange woman you don't know sitting in your car. That's a long time. And so she's brushing the water off, and finally she could sort of feel something, right? And she just turns her head slowly to me, and I just looked at her and I said, wrong car. And her response was this blood-curdling scream. It was unbelievable. And the door flings open, and she kind of ran off into the darkness, and that was the end of it. So the story is, who in the story was the one who is the underplay, and who's the one who overplayed it? Obviously, I'm the underplay guy, like, wrong car.
That's
and
beautiful.
Like somebody's going to kill her, and I tell that fun story because, well, it's a fun story, but I think in leadership, all of us have a bias to one side or another. And let's say, you and Will are, one of you is the CEO and one of you is the COO, and one of you underplays and one of you overplays. It's really important that you know who's who and which is which. And when you know it personally about yourself, you know how to gear up or pull back accordingly. So that's one thing I'm watching. I can give you another one, but I don't want to keep talking too long.
No, that's really good. I've never really thought through that lens before. I guess organizationally, do you see that the CEO, COO, is that typical? You see those two having different responses? I'm just curious in your leadership experience.
Definitely. Typically, partners and exec teams and senior leadership teams, you'll have, if it's healthy, you'll have a good mixture of all that, and you'll have all those different personalities in play. And it's like a good sports team. You need to know who's. It's how Kevin and I make really great decisions. He's more bet the farm all in, financially. And I'm more, let's think this through a little bit for a minute. And then let's go. But because he and I know that about each other, we make really good decisions, because he would say, if we did his thought immediately the whole time, who knows what would happen? It would be too much. If we did mine, it might not always be enough. We know that, and I'm not talking about compromise or beige or committee or in the middle or anything like that, but there's a wisdom that finds its place when you understand your wiring and the team and who you are and how you lead. Yeah. I'll toss out one other thing, if you want, that I'm seeing, and that's enough. I know we have a lot of cool questions here, but in terms of crisis, people don't expect you to have all the answers. That's one of the things I'm hearing a lot is, I don't know, COVID, and we don't know. The people you lead, the people you're responsible for, they don't expect you to have all the answers. What they do want, though, is the next step. They do expect you to know the next step. They do want a sense of direction. For example, in my world, I can only speak, mostly about my world, is they don't want all the details about how the church will reopen, but they want a date. Give them the next step. Give them what's the next piece. They do want that. And they don't really even want all the details, but give them the next step. I think those are a couple of things that come to mind in leading in crisis.
I think that's so good. And obviously no one knows what people are calling the new normal is going to look like on the other side of this crisis. But it does seem like on the other side of every major crisis, there is a new normal. Can you just speak to leaders today who are in the middle of this? What can they do to maximize the opportunities before them moving into the new normal so that they make sure they don't get left behind?
Yep. It's a great question. And I'm going to use a couple of words that maybe seem like, we've heard them before, but I really want to emphasize them. And that is our receptivity, my receptivity, your receptivity to adaptation and innovation. More than ever before. I know it's not a new idea, but right now it's new because we're moving so fast and culture is changing so fast. And I think we've all been forced to adapt quickly. Like we just, no one would have ever said you can have church when you don't have a church, a building. What do you mean close the doors? You can't do that and have church. Well, yes, you can. And then after that had happened, they said, well, okay, we can have church with the church closed, but you can't have children's ministries and student ministries online. Well, yeah, you can. And so, but here's now what we're learning. So the adaptation was forced. But here's the key. Now the opportunity is we're moving from forced adaptation to intentional adaptation and innovation. What I mean by that is we're now learning that while online church worked, it's now starting to not work, meaning it's having a shelf life. The attendance soared. Churches were having in the beginning greater attendances than they've ever had before. People fell in love with going to church in their jammies and eating pancakes, right? I mean, they love it. And now it's dropping off as rapidly as it was climbing. So we're being forced to adapt again. And I think what we're coming out of that is adaptation now has to move to innovation. And I think that's the opportunity. That's the opportunity. And I kind of hesitate from saying what it is, because every community is different, every church is different, every culture is, it's got to be what fits your context.
And I'm just curious how you guys process this, adapting in the middle of crisis. What does your cadence look like? Is it, hey, we're going to gather the top leaders in our organization every single day and just brainstorm? How do you guys ultimately make decisions in those meetings? How do you decide who is in the room? I'm just curious how you guys
Yeah.
process that?
We set up, our normal rhythm was the executive team and others a couple of two times a month. And we switched that to every week, plus every Tuesday morning at 1:30 in the afternoon now. Yeah. So it's every week, and it's 3 hours long, and it's intense, and it's moving and changing, plus what we call quick connects. Our culture is really, really good at quick connects, meaning texting and quick calls and, filling in the gap. So that's the exec team that meets there. However, we have a very, very fluid process that is not based on who's in the club or what line you are on an org chart. So almost every meeting, we have a number of other leaders from the organization, anywhere in the organization, based on the agenda, not where you are on the org chart. Who needs to speak into the issue? And people are coming and going from the meeting according to the agenda, which really helps. And so we're adapting and switching and moving as quick as we're required to move.
Wow. So it sounds like you guys have been able to adapt and adjust, and you'll continue to do so. However, I know also in crisis has the ability to take a lot of leaders out. There's a lot of leaders listening to this who are currently leading through crisis, and they're just getting hit hard, and maybe they feel like giving up. Can you just encourage leaders who are struggling to adapt and adjust and grow through crisis? What would you tell them?
Are talking about the challenges they face, or ones that are just kind of in a darker place and it's kind of more difficult? I mean, what are you thinking?
Talk to both.
Okay. Well,
one at a time. You can separate them. Yes.
Yeah, we can separate them, but we can. I'm just kind of thinking because you ask really, really great questions, and they deserve thought. But I think it starts with maybe challenges. And then sometimes when the challenges get overwhelming, we can get into a very discouraged place, and we can go there in a minute if you want to. But I think the one that's a little bit obvious, but maybe not, is we can no longer, on the challenge side, we can no longer predict the predictable. Now, no one knows the future. No one has a crystal ball. But there are some things that are predictable: human behavior. Things that would normally happen. If we lead this way, this will happen. If we encourage this way, this will happen. That's kind of gone, at least right now. It's people's lives have been changed. There's a little bit of, or a lot, I don't know how much, of fear in the culture. Fear either with health, fear about economics. At 12stone, our senior and founding pastor, Kevin Myers, he kind of introduced this, he introduced this idea of a stoplight, the imagery of a red, yellow, green. And in terms of how people come back to church. So the green lights, they're the ones that, I'm running back. You open the doors, I'm running back to church. I don't need a mask. I need a hug. You know what I mean? That's the green light. And the yellow light, I'm not running back. I'm walking back. And I want a mask, and I want to know that you got this thing safe for me and my family. And the red light is, I'm not sure I'm coming back. And maybe I will, maybe I won't. I've got some concerns about all this stuff. And so, that alone has made what was predictable, for example, who might not come back to church and when, to you really don't know. And so I think the practical thing that's coming out of that, you don't want to just give the discouragement, now what do you do about it, right? Is we've got to listen better than we've ever listened before.
Wow.
I think all good leaders listened, but I think we've got to listen better than we've ever listened before. There's other things we could talk about, especially in terms of economic realities, connecting that to do you overplay or underplay? But let me go to where you might have started a minute ago. I think for leaders who are really discouraged, or this is just getting to you, and I get that, man. I get that. It's just like one thing after another thing after another, and maybe you don't have a lot of help. I think the first thing to really hold on to, is that no crisis is ever permanent. History tells us no crisis is ever permanent. You're going to get through this. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but you're going to get through this. Which then leads to, I think, a really strong, important point is you're going to get through it, but you can't hide going through it. You can't duck. You can't cover up and just kind of, when it blows over, you'll get back in. You got to go through it. You've got to lean into it. You've got to embrace it. Or you're going to, I'll be really blunt, you're going to get buried by it. And then the third thing I would say is ask for help. There's somebody that can help you. Don't try to do this by yourself. There's somebody nearby. There's someone in your church, or someone in your company, somebody in your business. There's somebody nearby. They'll help you. Just get somebody to talk to. Don't do this in isolation. That's what I would say.
That's so good, Dan. I want to go back to just something you said I thought was so brilliant. The way leaders need to listen like they've never listened before. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to leaders about listening?
Yep. Yeah. And it's not that leaders don't want to listen. It's that sometimes we just go so fast and you have so much pressure and you've got so much going. Yeah. And by nature, not all leaders, but by nature, most are kind of type A. Well, I mean, that's not true, but they're moving. And so sometimes we think we're listening and we're not. Mm-hmm. And slowing down is difficult. And so I think it's almost a life change thing, a cultural change to slow down. We sort of learned a little bit about that in, shelter, what's the phrase?
In place. Yeah. Shelter in place. Yeah.
My mind doesn't say shelter in place. My mind says, I have to stay home,
Yeah.
Yeah. Shelter in place. I've never quite got that, but then he's like, you can't leave your house. That I get. And so we've been practicing doing something at home that's more difficult than we thought. And we're seeing what slowing down could look like, even in our home. And so one of the things, here, I'll give you one practical example. At 12stone, we're not a big survey culture. We're not really big on, well, let's see what 10,000 people think, or let's see what 200 people think. Not that we don't want to know, we do, but because we have a high sense of integrity about a survey. And number one, if you take a survey, you need to tell people the results. Mm-hmm. And number two, if you take a survey, you need to do something about it. You need to have the integrity. You can't just gather information from people and then don't tell them what it was and don't do anything about it. So we take that real serious. And we're engaging now in the first time of a little more survey work. And what do you think? And where are you at? And what are you doing? And to me, that's a form of listening. And then we sit down and have deeper conversations to say, tell us more. We need to understand more, especially even if we add in the issue now, the racial injustice. It's tell us more. We need to understand more. We're listening better than we ever have.
Yeah, that's so good. And it's such a challenge to leaders. Thank you for that, Dan. I want to shift a little bit and talk about your brand new book I'm holding up called The Confident Leader. As soon as I saw the title of this, I'm like, yep, I need to buy that now. Fantastic book. And I have several questions around it. But the first one is, do leaders really struggle with confidence? Like, why would anyone need to write this book, Dan? Tell me about that.
Yes, they do. They do. And now, not in a debilitating way that they turtle up and they go home, but in a way that when the chips are down, they don't always, and the pressure's up, they just don't always function at their best, and they miss out on their best. And here's the thing: you don't really notice it or see it maybe in a day or a week or a couple of months. And that's one of the benefits I have of leading as long as I have is I get to coach and be around leaders that I've known literally for decades. And so I can see it with a wider view and a longer view. And it's over a long period of time where it's barely perceptible in the short run. It's really obvious in the long run where you're just not operating at your best. And over the years, it takes its toll. So why did I write the book? I wrote it because I interact with these leaders, with men and women, and they experience more of what I call a roller coaster confidence. It's ups and downs according to performance and external things around them. In the church world, one of the obvious external performance things is your attendance on a Sunday. In business, it could be sales. It's a lot of things that come at you, and it gets to you. And I'll tell you what happens. And this is a pattern I've watched for a long time. Is it first begins to settle into self-doubt, and maybe not a big deal. You kind of brush it off, dust your knees off and get them going. But then it hits you again and hits you again. And the self-doubt then leads to pretending, and it's pretending that you're all together and you're all good and it's all working when it really isn't. And then there's a psychological mechanism that kicks in when it goes from self-doubt to pretending. By the way, this takes a long time. This isn't something that happens in a week. That in the pretending phase is, that I'm good, and I got it all together and I got all the answers, and of course you don't. Is then you go to make it work in your mind and to make it work in your context, in your job, in your business, you start lowering the bar and lowering the standard to make it work. And I've just watched that for a long time, and you just don't have to do that. Just don't have to do that.
Yeah. So, you talk about the goal of the book is to get to a place of authentic confidence. Can you kind of cast vision for what confidence should look like in a leader's life?
Yeah. That's a gigantic thing. I wrote 15 chapters on it. But if I could narrow it, let me
read the book.
Come on, open the book. Yeah. But I think though, if I could put it down into two big parts, and one is a reliance on God's presence and power in all that you do. Now, I'm speaking, of course, from a place of faith, obviously, but a reliance on God's power, His presence in your life, where you just know there's a consistent assurance of Him with you. I'm going to just stop there for a second, because what I don't mean is, am I going to heaven? Am I saved? Does Jesus love me? I'm not talking about that. You know that. But I talk to leaders all the time where they know God loves them. Their theology is right. They get it. It's not do they love me, and am I going to heaven and all that kind of stuff? It's, is He with me? Like, is God, okay, I'm in it. Are you in it with me? I'm not sure you're with me right now. I know you love me, but are you with me? And when leaders get really honest about that, that's a big deal. And so that's part one. And part two is a development of your own gifts and talents, your own abilities. And that really just speaks to the partnership that I think there's a partnership that exists between God and man and God and woman. And I think when we miss that is we miss the confidence. And where people get in trouble, either with overconfidence or underconfidence, right? Because either one's not good. Either one will get you in trouble. Is when you favor one or the other too much. Like when you say, well, it's all about God, kind of a fatalistic thing. Well, it's all about God and it's all God's will and whatever, and I just, whatever. Okay, that's a mistake. Or it's no, I'll do the work. I'll make it happen. It's all about me. It's a partnership, and that authentic, consistent partnership, and understanding that and spending your life working on it. That's what makes the foundation of your confidence breathe better.
And that is so good. You made the statement in the book. I'll just read it here. It said, the moment you step it up to lead, you immediately become aware of your level of confidence. And I threw the question in there, what if people don't like what they become aware of? And what you just said was so powerful. I guess it was 2 years ago now, I took on a new role as director of development at the organization I'm in. And I did not like what I became aware of when I stepped into that role. It was a major lack of confidence. But what you said there, and actually in the book, I believe his name, is it the pastor at Life Church, Terry? Is that his name?
Oh, Jerry.
Jerry.
The exec pastor, yeah.
Yeah, he made a statement very similar to what you said about God partnering with him. And there was a time where he felt like the church was outgrowing him.
Yes.
And he had to come back to the fact that God put me here. And if God put me here and is with me, I'll have the ability to grow. And I feel like that was what was missing when I became aware that I don't know if I have what it takes to be in this position. But putting my confidence in that, I just think what you just shared is leaders, you need to hear that over and over again. Rewind, rewind, rewind. Anything you want to share before I go to another question? I just wanted to reemphasize how big that was.
Yeah, well, it is big, and thank you for saying that. But when the quote that you brought up, when you step up to lead, you immediately become aware of your level of confidence. And what if you see something you don't like, right? Because that happens. But I guess what I want to say about that is that's a good thing. When you see something you don't like, that's a good thing. And if you want to do something about it, that's a good thing, because that motivates you to grow and learn and change. The only problem there is the only thing that I would worry about for you or Will or anybody is listening to us today is if you stepped up to lead, you saw something you didn't like, and you became aware of something, and then you didn't do anything about it. That's the formula for disaster. that goes back to what I was saying before. Then you start pretending, then you start defending, then you start excusing, then you start lowering the bar. And of course, you're not going to move ahead that way. So,
yeah. One area of growth that you focus on in the book is growing your character, and that's a source of confidence as well. I'm just curious, based on your years in leadership, how can one grow and develop their character?
Yeah, well, I guess now I'm giving a shameless plug. So thank you that you're bringing up the book here, because I devoted an entire section, 5 chapters to that, because it's so important.
Yeah.
And I think the core of that, Doug, I think the core of that is that self-leadership is the essence of character development. I think that's, if I had to say it in a sentence or two, I'd start there, that self-leadership is the core of character development. You can develop it in that way. And then second, you really can't lead others if you can't first lead yourself. So the things that I talk about, whether it's consistency or authority or adaptability, resilience, those kinds of chapters, that's really about leading yourself. And in that way, that strengthens your character. So that's right. That's what I think it's. Well, you could drill down as much as you want, but that's what I think the big idea is about.
Yeah. Similarly related, I love to ask leaders about how they deal with the pain and the weight and the pressures that come with leadership. Especially I think young leaders aspire to leadership and they think, oh, I'm going to have a sweet office. I get to speak on stage. It's going to be, I have a staff reporting me, I have a budget. And they think of all these cool things. And then you get into it and it's just like, yeah, this wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
A lot of weight. How do you personally deal with that? And how have you dealt with that over the years?
Yeah, I think, I love that question because it comes up a ton. I think the first thing I do, if it's really piling up, if it's a lot, again, not every day is a good day. So that's not what I'm talking about. But the bigger picture, I think the first thing I do is I go back to my calling, and I think that's really important. I know calling has changed over time, and we have differing definitions of it. And I think it's all healthy and good, generational definitions of what calling looks like. So I'm not focusing there, but some sense of calling. This isn't just a job. This is what, I was created on purpose, for a purpose, that kind of a notion. So I go back to that. And that reminds me of a bigger picture of purpose. And it helps me stay on that big picture. And then I go real practical. So I start there and then I go practical. And the practical thing is every job has the bad, the junks, the stuff that you don't want to do. But I remind myself that I do that because I get to do the other. I'm floored that I get paid to do this. I love what I do. I went from undergraduate work that had nothing to do with theology or church or anything, and to seminary. And a lot of the students who were in seminary when they were Bible majors, and so they were bored and said, "This is repeat." And I was having the time of my life. I remember thinking to myself, "I'm getting credit for this." And then I became I had a job that I'm getting paid for this. And so when you're called and when you love your work, the little things that you need to do for the things that you get to do, that's how I say it. The things that I need to do so that I can do the things that I get to do, that just helps me keep going. And that makes a difference.
Yeah, I'd like to go here sometimes with leaders. Can you talk about calling and doing what you love versus making money? I'm just curious what you've learned about money over the course, because it's like, oh, well, man, I would love to be like Dan and do what I love, but I don't know if I can support my family then. What have you learned about money over your years of ministry and leadership?
Well, first of all, having some is better than not. So let's just start there. Yeah. I would suggest, let's be real. I've grown accustomed to eating, and so have my children and my wife, and so let's not pretend that that we don't want to make a good living and that kind of thing. That said, I've just coached way too many people to know that there's a thing that I call the golden handcuffs, and literally, which is exactly what it sounds like. They make an incredible amount of money, and they lose their freedom. They lose their options. One of the things that John mentored me in a long, long time ago is leaders never, ever, ever don't. He's just the options. You just don't lose your options, because here's the thing: life is made up of trades. All of life, all your life, is a series of trades, and trades tap into options. And when you surrender your options, you lose your freedom. And when you lose your freedom, you're not the person you were ever designed to be. So the golden handcuffs are when you make so much money, you can't change, even if you want to change. And that's a terrible place to be. And now, by the way, you can have golden handcuffs, not because you make a lot of money. You can be in golden handcuffs because you make a little money, but you overspend yourself. You can get them. You can get those on in more than one way. But the happiness it just doesn't come from how much you make. It comes from how productive you are. I get to talk to people in their 60s now, and they never ever regret doing the challenge, doing the thing, I remember one guy. I know we don't have a lot of time, but stories are sometimes better than me just rambling on with principles.
Go for it. Yeah.
One guy named Steve, and Steve was like in his 40s, and he was in, I think, engineering somewhere, and one of my J-men back in San Diego, Joshua's men, great guy. And he'd always wanted to be a teacher. He just always, and everybody knew he'd be a great teacher. But he was in his 40s, he was making a lot of money, and he said, I can't do it, I'd have to go back to school and whatever. And his wife said, I'll babysit, I'll do whatever. Well, I'll just, when he made the choice, it was like something unfolding before our eyes. They sacrificed for a couple of years, and he became an elementary school teacher in his 40s. And year after year after year, he won the award for best teacher. The people clamored, parents clamored to be around him. He was extraordinary. And it was one of those things where he was almost locked into the golden handcuffs. And he said, nope, I'm going to do what I'm called to do, what I love to do, what I've always wanted to do. He did it. And to this day, and that story I could tell 100 times. And I always tell the men and women I get to talk to is, man, don't get locked in. Don't surrender your options. Go for the freedom. Be the person God designed you to be.
I've never heard that illustration. That was extremely powerful. Thank you for sharing. One thing you mentioned in there that John, referring to John Maxwell, mentored you. And I know you got to work with John, and you were mentored by John for 38 years, which is incredible. And I was sharing with you last night on our prep call for this interview that, John's been a huge hero in my life. And I'm just curious, what are maybe one or two of the greatest things that you've learned under being under his mentorship in your life?
Yeah, well, we could spend a long time there too. But with John, I think I would start by saying it's a little bit more attitude, things like attitude and generosity and how he thinks, which is something that's a big deal to me. So I don't always want to know what my mentor would do, what the advice is, which is always great. I always want to, John, what would you do? I've got a problem to solve. Help me, right? And of course, I'm grateful for his advice because it's always so good. But what I've really worked on for 38 years is how he thinks. Because when I learned how somebody thinks, whether it's any of the people who have mentored me, then I can multiply their wisdom into a lot of other things. But I'll give you one. I give you many of kind of life-changing things, and that was, people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And of course, there's a lot of stories attached to that, stories that now are in his books and he talks about and stuff. But I might have been one of the first ones he said that to back in 1982, I think it was. and I'll tell you, if we had time, I don't think we do. If we had time, it's a longer story. You would see that I probably wouldn't be here on this podcast with you today had he not had that moment with me then, coaching me with the way I approach coaching is pay attention. I think sometimes we overcomplicate coaching. We want to make all these charts and graphs and things, and coaching really comes down to two words: pay attention. And if you pay attention to the people that you lead, the people who are close to you, you can have the right word in the right time at the right moment. And that's what a good coach does to help you win. And so he did in that moment. And in that moment, had he not walked me through, people care, people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care, I probably wouldn't be here. I probably would not have made it in ministry. And so I'm eternally grateful for him and that principle and about 50 others. But, he's still coaching me and teaching me stuff now, which is awesome.
Yeah. I think I think he was doing a live and he just shared that you would text him, hey, it's been 38 years. I'm still learning from him. So that was awesome. This may be the same answer, pay attention, but I want to ask it in case you have more to say about it. But in the book, The Confident Leader, you made a statement that caring about people is not automatic. And I think sometimes as leaders, especially in a ministry and nonprofit world, we think that just because we're Christians, we love and care for people. But clearly you make the statement that that's not the case. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, I think we all know it's not the case. Whether it's you've been in a restaurant, you go, I don't think the waiter cares about me. If you had a boss, I don't think he, if you had a doctor or mechanic, I'm pretty sure he doesn't care. So we know that's true. It's not automatic. And I think that, and I'm not talking about a leader or somebody who literally is just some Machiavellian. I don't really care about people. I don't mean that. I think there's a couple of categories. Well, let me back up. I think sometimes there is care, but you're so overwhelmed with your own problems and you're so consumed with trying to solve things and just navigate your own life, you don't have any space left so you've got to figure that part out first. Because if you're so consumed in your world, you shrink your world. It's like this. Somebody who is really sick, right? Somebody who has cancer or something. Well, their world naturally, understandably shrinks because they're trying to survive. Well, leaders do that emotionally. When they're overwhelmed with their problems, their leadership capacity shrinks because they're trying to survive themselves. You've got to lead bigger than that. That's the starting place. Then I think there's a couple of groups. The first group is that leaders, they don't care necessarily, but they want to. They know they don't feel what they need to feel, but they want to. And I think that group literally, because you can't just say, now I care. You do or you don't, right? You can't just flip a switch. But you can ask God to help you care. I've seen that happen. And the second group was part of my story is you really care about people, you really love people, but you just sucked at showing it. You just didn't know how to show it. You moved too fast. You went too fast. You were always trying to save the world. And John would say to me, you're running right by the world. Can you slow down? Those are people. They call them people, and I realized, oh my gosh. But he help me see that you have deep care and love and passion for people, but you've got to slow down. And so for that group, it's just having a coach sort of help you express the care you have for people. So those are the two groups that I see, and those are the two ways that you can actually care more intentionally than if before. Yeah.
It's good. You've spent most of your career in ministry as an executive pastor or a number two in an organization. A lot of leaders listening to this, they aspire, especially young leaders, they all want to aspire to be number one. But whether they're actually in the number two seat as an executive pastor or just a young leader in the organization, in one way or another, we're all number twos. And I'm just curious, after all the years you've been faithful as a number two, what have you learned about being a great number two that we could all learn from?
Wow. This is the topic of another book soon, hopefully to come out someday.
Let's go.
I love this topic. A lot of my work is in the executive pastor realm. So let me just toss out one big idea, and then we can go wherever you want to go with it.
Sure.
I think one of the keys is the ability to navigate all power and no power at the same time. The ability to navigate all authority and no authority at the same time. It's to understand authority. Like, for example, I've been given a huge amount of authority over the years, but it's important for me to remember it was transferred to me. It doesn't belong to me. I'm stewarding it. And I think it's important for number two and executives to have the strength to lead, but you don't have to do it. You can't, in other words, you don't want to just be an executive valet who just kind of like, well, I just do what I'm told. Because then you're not helping anything. You're not leading anything. You have to have enough force and gumption and authority and drive in you to lead, but you're not clamoring for more. That's what I'm trying to say. You steward what you've been given. It's a sacred trust that you've been given, and it doesn't belong to you. Of course, the hard part is you're still responsible to lead, even though the authority doesn't belong to you, but you're not clamoring for more. And that's a difficult place for a lot of leaders to be. Here's why. If you have enough drive to actually lead, typically an individual wants more. And it's difficult to lead with what you've been given and to serve, but still also have enough horsepower to make something happen. I think that's at the core of a conversation that I've had hundreds of times with leaders. And of course, at that point, it goes into really nuanced things about the individual and the context and the culture where they lead. I don't know. That was a lot. Did that make sense to you?
Yeah, I've never heard anyone speak on that. That was extremely powerful. Talk to young leaders about. I always just like saying being faithful where they're at and serving the leaders they're under. Because again, I guess just what advice do you have for young leaders being a 360-degree leader? Would be my question.
360. So, I get the 360 in a lot of contexts, but unpack there's a lot of ways to go at to talk about the young leader. Yeah. What do you?
I guess I'll just for the time that we have left. What advice do you have for young leaders listening?
That I get better. Okay. I love the young leader. We have a really, really young staff. And one of the things that comes up a lot is they want to, I hate saying they, but you're talking to somebody who loves the young leaders. They want to rise fast. They want to rise really fast. And I want to be promoted. Give me more responsibility. I said, you've been here for 8.5 minutes. But just calm down for a second, And here's what I say is, build the thing you've been given. Don't get frustrated about the thing that you want that you don't have. Build the thing you were picked for. Build the thing. Somebody picked you. Somebody thinks you're awesome. Build. Grow the thing you were given. And I promise you'll get noticed. And the second thing is, so don't get frustrated about what you don't have. Build the thing you were given. That's one. And the second is enjoy it. Have fun. The two things have to go together. Fruit and joy, if you want to be old-fashioned or use scripture, which is not old-fashioned, Spirit, Galatians 5, but fruit or productivity or results, whatever word you like better, but fruit and joy. You've got to have both, because you won't go the distance without both. What I mean by that is, if you're highly productive, but there's no joy, you're not going to go the distance. You're not going to go 39 years. You're not going to go 49 years. You're not going to last. And if you have lots of joy, like, woo, party on, but you're not getting anything done, dude, that's not going to work either. You've got to have both. One of my favorite things to do with young leaders, actually, and leaders of any age, is over a cup of coffee. Now it's tea for me, I'm a tea. Hey, real men drink tea. Come on. So
I have to dive into that because I'm a coffee addict, no doubt. Did you intentionally quit drinking coffee? It sounds like.
You know what? My body intentionally aged and said, we're not going to do this anymore.
Okay.
And so I just, rather than whine and pout, because I loved coffee. I loved the smell of coffee. It was awesome. Yeah. It's social. I'm very I thought, I'm not going to complain. I'm going to drink tea. I'm going to make it an art. I'm going to find the best teas all over the world. I'm going to get into it.
Wow.
So I've made it fun. And so that's how I got into tea. But one of my favorite things to do is, with a young leader or leader of any age, is to literally write, and this is the best coaching conversation, again, keep it simple. I literally write the two words on a napkin, fruit and joy. And I spin it around and push it across the table and say, talk to me. And inevitably, one of those two sides is not happening. And then I say, let's talk about it. Either they're productive, but they're not happy, or they're happy, but they're not productive. And I'm telling you, you've got to have both.
Wow. So good. Well, I'm going to use a lot of napkins coming up. Anyway, That's beautiful. I want to dive into the lightning round in a second, but I want to give you an opportunity. Again, we're talking about the book, The Confident Leader, that Dan just wrote. He also wrote multiple other books. He's always writing blog posts and helpful emails. And so, Dan, can you just tell the audience where can they find you and connect with you?
The easiest thing is danreiland.com, REILAND, just my blog. I don't have a website. That is kind of my simple, everything free kind of place to go, danreiland.com. You can read a lot of stuff there. Amazon's an easy place to get Confident Leader. I think that's fast and easy. And then, of course, 12stone Church. I'm just really easy to find. And I try to be helpful to as many as I can.
Well, you're very helpful to everyone listening to this, so thanks again. And let's dive right into the lightning round again. These are just a bunch of fun questions that I like to ask leaders. And the first one is this: what is the best advice you've ever received, and who gave it to you?
Oh, wow. I can't say Jesus on this one, right? It's because
you can.
This is the Sunday school answer I'm supposed to give. Well, I am blessed with a lot of incredible mentors, and of course, John the longest, and so. And there's so many things I could pick from that John has said. So I'm going to just pick one. I don't know if I can rank order them. It's, but I think a long time ago, sometimes it's when you hear what you hear in the moment you hear it, kind of like a book you read. It's the time you read it. I remember one time John saying, Dano, he calls me Dano. He said, Dano, it's not what happens to you. It's what happens in you. And there was and I know that's been said 1,000 times, but it was in that moment, it was hearing it back then that it was a foundational moment. And it's just so true. There's so many things that are going to come at all of us as leaders, and that doesn't matter. It's what happens in you. It's how you respond. It's what you do with it that matters.
You could put a quote on a billboard for everyone to read, what would it say?
Oh, I should have looked at your lightning round questions. I'll tell you one I love. When you've done all you can do, go to bed. God is still up. I love that.
So good. What's the best purchase you've made in the last year for $100 or less?
Well, I can't say tea, and I can't fit my guitar addiction in under $100. The best purchase?
Yep.
In under $100. Oh, I know. I'm recently learning a new thing. John was helping me. I don't do video very well. I'm a in live teaching, coaching, pastor type, coach type. But I've been pushed by some of my team to video and to put out there. And something happens though, when the light goes on, my brain goes off, but I said, you know what? I'm always up for a challenge. I'm always eager to learn something new, and I'm game and I'm doing it. So I did, I bought something for under $100 that's fun, and it's helping me learn and grow. I bought a mic. I bought a mic to goes in my iPhone, and that little light thing, and we are rocking and rolling with videos, baby.
Ooh, that's awesome! Way to go. What's the top 2 or 3 books that you've found yourself handing out in the last year? I'm just curious.
Last year, I'm a book guy, so that's a tough one too. One of my coaches and dear friends, Dr. Sam Chand. I love this book. I love it because I love it, but also because the pastors, I took our 8 campus pastors through it, and they loved it. And it's called Bigger, Faster Leadership. The Suez Canal and the Panama Canal. And he just does this beautiful interplay between the leadership and the history and the president and governments and people losing their lives and very complex, big decisions, and then takes it into your practical world called Bigger, Faster Leadership. That's a really, really good book. A couple others, again, going back maybe a year and a half, but I really adapted them. See if I can get the titles right. But one is called Essentialism, I think. And the other is Deep Work. I kind of read them as a thing together, Deep Work and Essentialism. They're not light reads, they're not easy reads, but they're powerful, they're really good. And I think today with people, the clamoring for time, the less time, the busyness, thing, when do you get real work done? When do you get deep work done? How do you organize yourself? How do you do that in a real way? Those two books, Deep Work and Essentialism, are really, really. Is it McEwen and?
Yep.
And who's the other one on Deep
Is
Work?
it Cal Newport, maybe? Yeah.
Cal Newport. Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Those three books come to the top of my mind. They're really good.
Do you listen to podcasts? And if you do, what are your go-tos?
I do. I run every day and I listen to podcasts and stuff. Well, I'm a big fan of Carey Nieuwhof. He's a great friend and he just has an extraordinary gift about him.
Yes.
He can just get people to say anything and he brings extraordinary people on. So I'm grateful for my friend Carey. And of course, I'm a fan of Andy Stanley. He's got a leadership series that he does. I listen to, and from there, I think I just go broad and wide. It's people send me listen to this. Those are probably two of my go-tos, and then others are just stuff that gets sent my way. Yeah. Obviously, you leave off John Maxwell.
Yeah, there we go.
Doing a series on Mondays and on oh my gosh, it's so good.
So good.
Have you been listening to some of it?
Oh yeah. Anything the guy releases, I'm on. I love it.
It's really good.
Yeah. You get to spend time with a lot of great leaders. I'm curious, do you have a go-to question that no matter how many times you have dinners with leaders, you always ask this question?
I do. Several. One is personal and one is more organizational. The one I love asking is simply this: what do you want? What do you want? And people stop and go, what do you mean, what do you want? What do you want? I know you want something. What do you want out of life? What do you want out of ministry? Talk to me about what you want. So many leaders don't give themselves permission to be honest about what they want in life. And those become, the most dangerous leaders are the ones who don't know what they want. Those are dangerous leaders. But then the conflicted leaders are the ones who they get tripped up in the difference between wanting something and theologically. Am I allowed to want something in life? And because of course you are. God made you that way. Here's where we get messed up. It's believing you can have everything you want. That's where you get messed up. I think we need to be honest about what you want and pursue that with abandon in alignment with God's will, but just keep the boundary of you can't have everything that you want. So I love asking leaders that because so many have never thought about it. The organizational question I like to ask is, because this one trips everybody up and it still trips me up, is how are decisions made? People always go cross-eyed with that question, like, I don't know, it's kind of a circus here. I don't really know how decisions are made, and it's kind of true. If you dive into, as a consultant, and even here, it's not a circus, but it's difficult. I don't know that I can't remember a place where I've been to where it's just clean and pure and everybody knows how decisions are made.
Wow. And
yet it's one of the most critical functions of leadership in any organization, and we don't know how to do it.
Well, we're about to find. Oh, go ahead.
That's it.
Well, I was going to say we're about to find out because I'm just going to reverse this on you. What do you want?
What do I want?
Yeah.
I think my legacy has to be raising up thousands and thousands of leaders who they get there faster, they go farther, they go faster, and they go farther because of a little contribution that I've made. I think that's what I want. Now, obviously, at the core of me, that's my global passion leadership thing, why I think God made me, why he put me here. Obviously, what I really want at the core of me is deep and meaningful relationships with my family and close friends. And so, and the older I get and the older people around me get, I think the number one regret, it's not the bucket list thing that people have. The number one regret is when their relationships closest to them aren't right. And so I live for that. Andy Stanley said something there when I was at North Point. Of course, he's a brilliant, brilliant individual and a brilliant teacher. And he said something about family life that just, it was one of those moments that just hits you. He said, this is back in, I don't know, the late 90s, I guess. He said, well, Sandra and I we we do our family in such a way. We lead our kids and we love our kids and do our family in such a way. He says it far more eloquently, but I'll get there. In such a way so that when one day they grow up and leave, they'll want to come back. That's a brilliant statement.
Wow.
Because that's an entire lifetime of how to lead in such a way that you raise your children strong enough to leave, but once they leave, they want to come back. And Patty and I have worked on that, and our kids come back, and we love that. And now our granddaughter, and she's there. So that's really a big deal. That's really important. But for me, legacy-wise, what do I want? I want to have helped thousands of leaders lead bigger, faster, and farther than they have in the past.
Yeah, well, I know you've helped us today, and you're helping everyone listening to this, and so thank you for that. And as we close, is there anything else you want to leave leaders with today as we wrap up?
I think you have done a good job interviewing, and I think we're good to go. Just stay in the game. Don't let this COVID thing get you down. Keep your head up and keep going.
I'd like to thank our sponsor, Henny Jewelers. They're a jeweler owned by my friend and mentor, John Henny. My wife, Laura, and I both got our engagement and our wedding rings at Henny Jewelers, and we absolutely love them. Not only do they have great jewelry, but they also invest in people. In fact, they give every engaged couple a book to help them prepare for their marriage, and we just love that. And so if you're in need of a good jeweler, check out Henny Jewelers at hennyjewelers.com. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, BAB Inc. BAB is an insurance broker, a third-party administrator, and consulting firm led by my friend and mentor, Russell Livingston. Russell is extremely passionate about developing the next generation of leaders, which is why he's partnering with us on this podcast, and he's also opened up his offices here in Pittsburgh to host our monthly leadership events, and we are extremely grateful for that. The nonprofit that I work at, Light of Life Rescue Mission, started using BAB as our insurance broker around 3 years ago, and we've had an unbelievable experience with them, and we highly recommend them. So if you or your organization has any insurance needs, please check out and learn more about BAB at babbins.com. That's BABBINS.com. Well, hey, everyone, thank you so much for listening to my interview with Dan Reiland. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did, and you can find ways to connect with him and links to everything that he discussed in the show notes at l3leadership.org/257. And as always, if this episode made an impact on your life, it would mean the world to me if you would share it with others, post it on social media, let us know what your key takeaway was. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a rating and review on iTunes. It does help us grow our audience, so thank you in advance for that. And as always, I like to end with a quote, and I'll quote Gerald Brooks again. This was so good. He said this, he said, "If you cannot serve in the shade, then you will never be able to serve in the limelight." So good. I'll say that again. If you cannot serve in the shade, then you will never be able to serve in the limelight. Hey, hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we can't wait to be with you next time. Laura and I appreciate you so much, and have a great day.